42 different books. Each book had that person's name on it. So you can imagine the effect it had when I handed this person a present and they think, oh, here's another book from Joe. We know Joe always gives books. But they open it up, and now it says, well, whatever their name is, Powerfirmations. And they've looked through it, and it's like unbelievably powerful to just look through the book, let alone just start reading the book or using the book. And so I first of all want to acknowledge that idea. I mean, all the way back to in the early days when you're playing on your computer and you cut and paste and find and replace these words, and now using the more modern technology to actually make a print-on-demand book that is individualized. Now, I have to ask, was that a big deal to do? Because I remember being curious, thinking, how is this guy going to go and make 42 books, and is this going to cost me a fortune? And it wasn't. It was relatively inexpensive. It wasn't that much more than a regular hardcover book would be. So what technology, if you can tell me, or how did you stumble across the ability to do that?
Well, there was a lady who was an editor that had edited my first book, Powerful Attitudes, and she contacted me about the whole, self-publishing and told me about a print-on-demand publisher. And then I started looking around, and I found a lot of print-on-demand publishers out there. And basically, because of our digital technology, and this is something, I had set out this intention and this concept and idea and the intention of doing this back in 1985. Well, it was literally, 26 years later that I came to the place of really understanding that how I can really make this come to fruition. And but the technology is there today to allow people to do the print-on-demand publishing. And I had to work through a process with the people that I was working with that are printing the book. I had to work through a process of being able to making it affordable to get the book made, and we figured out the formula. They didn't even know. They really didn't even understand what I was talking about when I first started talking to them. About a personalized book, because they'd never heard of such a thing. And there are a lot of personalized books out there for children. You can get them printed for children, and generally they're very small books, and a lot of very empowering books out there for children that are personalized. And then I think there's one company that does some personalized books that kind of embed you and your significant other in your life into a Romeo and Juliet type story.
I love these creative ideas. Well, I know that some people listening on this Hypnotic Gold interview are going to be saying, how do I get my own book? So we might as well just go ahead and tell them and then keep going with the interview. But where do they go if they want their own personalized affirmations book, the Powerfirmations?
The best way to get it, because I have two different books, the Powerfirmations and the Faithfirmations, is to go to the positiveattitudes.com website. Okay. And in the menu bar there, you'll see a link to whichever one that you desire to take a closer look at.
All right. So it's www.positiveattitudes.com.
Yes, that's correct.
Positiveattitudes.com. Okay, well, let's keep going here. I'm curious about the way you structure the affirmations themselves, because affirmations are a source of controversy. First of all, not everybody believes that they even work. I mean, it's self-talk, and you're telling yourself, I am whatever it is. And people talk about saying it in the first person, the second person, the third person. And some affirmations are better than others. I mean, can you quickly give me an overview of your strategy or what you found that really works when structuring an affirmation, which you now call a Powerfirmation?
Yeah, sure. I spent a lot of time just studying, what would make it the most powerful. And one of the reasons that I did it in the first, second, and third person is that when you look at it from that perspective, from each of those perspectives, it becomes more of a whole brain experience. And so
can you give me an example real quick of those different ones, or just pick one and give me an example of it so everybody is clear about it?
Sure. The affirmation you said a while ago is that I attract wealth easily. Mm-hmm. In the second person, your book reads, Joe attracts wealth easily. Now, from the second person perspective, Joe, the way, if you're sitting there, let's say you're sitting there in your easy chair and you know that you're watching television or you're doing something to kill time and you know you need to be up doing something, you give yourself commands. There's commands that you give yourself. I'll be sitting there and I know that I need to be up doing something more productive than sitting in the easy chair, and I'll say to myself, Mike, you need to get yourself up right now, and you need to go get with it. So we do give these kind of commands to ourselves.
Well, isn't it true that most of the commands we give ourselves are kind of brutal? I mean, isn't it true that across the board, most people's self-talk is very negative and belittling, and that most of us aren't even aware of it?
Absolutely.
And what you're doing, and what I am also doing, is focusing on that self-talk and changing the self-talk by turning them into affirmations.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are very, very brutal on ourselves, and then when we're growing up too, when we're in our formative years, we have all of these authority figures that mean well, but they are very misinformed in how to raise children, what to put in their minds, and so we're dealing with all of that too. And the best way I know of is to eliminate a limiting belief in some way. I mean, there's various methods. You do a great job in spiritual marketing at teaching, how to overcome limiting beliefs. But one of the ways is to put the positive in there where the negative, has existed for such a long, long time, is to really rewrite that. It's kind of like it's kind of like a computer works. The hard disk on a computer, it has a certain address where information is stored. And if you save a file under the same name, your computer's going to come up and say you're replacing this file. And that's basically what's happening with a positive affirmation. And my understanding is that you are taking the positive, you're going into that same place and you're replacing the positive, or you're replacing the negative that exists with a positive.
Do you find that just thinking the affirmation versus writing the affirmation versus hearing the affirmation, is any one of those more powerful than another?
I think you really need to do all three. I think if you really want to work on it, you need to do all three. Ultimately, I think what you want is from your automatic subconscious mind, you want the affirmation to become a very natural belief to you. So you're basically through the auditory, through verbalizing the affirmation, you're strengthening it to a place, and you're kind of in training at that point in time to really be able to replace the negative there. And so it takes a little bit more. It takes more. It needs to affect your emotions. It needs to happen on the emotional level. And when you do the verbal in there, when you read it, write it, I think if you really want to see quick change and to see the effectiveness of it, quickly, my whole thing is do it all, whatever it takes.
Well, you mentioned something interesting that we need to touch on, and you said that the emotion needs to be involved. And I know that the subconscious, unconscious mind responds to repetition and pictures and emotion. So when they are writing, saying, or thinking any of these affirmations, Powerfirmations, do you encourage adding emotion in some way by visualizing what these are like or feeling what these are like? Or how do you infuse the emotion to make these even more powerful so they take root in the unconscious mind?
Well, what I did was in writing, part of the structure of the Powerfirmations is I included both all three, I call them modalities of perception, and that is the visual, the auditorial, and the kinesthetic, the feeling, and using all three of those has a comprehensive effect upon your mind. I guess most of us have learned, that's been in this field for very long at all, we've learned that people have a predominant or a preferred modality by which they perceive the world, the way that they perceive the world, whether it be visual